The media has a weird obsession with hating Jews. It's almost like a cult. Even when two Jewish boys were murdered, point blank, execution style, the media could only last about 5 hours before they pounced on a story built on propaganda and lies that claimed that hundreds of settlers descended on the town where their brothers were killed and committed pogroms similar to the Holocaust. The only problem is, most of it was not true. I'm Luke, and this is the Israel Guys. Hello and welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of anti-Israel propaganda and Jew hatred, you should have a direct connection to the land and people of Israel. Guys, Al Jazeera's Plus YouTube channel has more than 1 million subscribers. So if you're going to help us defeat Al Jazeera and other anti-Israel Jew-hating media just like them, you need to hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our content, and drop it down in the comments if you are a new viewer. We would love to hear from you. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We're getting close to 1,000 followers on Twitter, so just Twitter is kind of where I hang out a lot of the time. Go to The Israel Guys on Twitter. Give us a follow there. It would mean a whole lot to us. I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Israeli Good Wine, for sponsoring today's episode. This year, celebrate Passover with wine from Israel direct to your door in a Passover Seder box or just a box of Israeli wine. Find out more or get yours today at passover.israeligoodwine.com. Find the link down in the description below. Just to clarify, because the media has been obsessed with the story about supposed violent settlers descending on the town of Huwarrah after a terrorist attack that left Hallel and Yagel Yaniv dead several weeks ago. The media has been so obsessed. Even though we went to the town ourselves, we documented it. It's close to 20,000 views online now, or even more than that. The world is still obsessed. I find article after article, videos, more than 1 million shekels raised for the supposed victims of this town. So I went back to the town of Huwarrah. We drove from one end to the other with our cameras filming both sides of the road the entire time. We didn't cut anything out. We didn't edit anything. And we surveyed the damage that was done by the supposed settlers that burned the town of Huwarrah. Take a watch right here. With the Arab town of Huwarrah here in Samaria being the focal point of so much international media after the terrorist attack that killed Hallel and Yagel Yaniv a couple of weeks ago, the mainstream media, their focus for the story was the so-called radical Jewish settlers that descended on the town after the attack and committed pogroms of burning dozens of homes, burning hundreds of Arab vehicles. Today, we thought we would drive through the town of Huwarrah, both sides of the road. We will have our cameras ready, and we're going to capture any and all so-called destruction committed by the Jewish settlers. Are you ready to find out the truth? Let's go. So we are entering the town of Huwarrah from the south, and as we get just before we get into town, the first thing you'll see is 2 burned houses on the right side of the road. Now, this would be very interesting if this was committed by by Jewish guys a couple of weeks ago, but interestingly enough, these 2 houses were burned by the Arabs themselves in an internal feud 2 years ago. Now, how do I know that? I actually drove by when this house was on fire 2 years ago. I completely remember it. So, but the funny thing is, we actually caught the mainstream media filming those houses right after the supposed pogroms were committed and vandalism by Jewish settlers. There was a cameraman that was filming that house. So if you saw it on the mainstream media, that was a complete and utter lie. So we are pulling into the town of Huwarrah on the southern side, and we are looking for damage that was done by vandals, okay? We're looking for burned out cars, burned homes, and broken windows, because there would be fires that were set and rocks that were thrown. Now, interestingly enough, Joshua Waller and some of our other volunteers were driving through this town about 2 hours after the terrorist attack where Hallel and Yagel were murdered, and they had rocks thrown on their vehicles. Joshua had a rock hit the top of his vehicle from a 3rd or 4th story building on either sides of this road where the Arabs were throwing rocks down at any Israeli car that they saw. So that was happening, and that was absolutely crazy. But as we're getting into town, so far we are not finding any kind of vandalism, but we're going to keep looking, okay? You guys are seeing left and right side of the road. It's all on camera here. So we're getting close to the center of town. This is the main intersection with the roundabout. And by the way, we're filming about 12 days after the terrorist attack, maybe 11 days after the supposed vandalism was committed here. And this is the main junction. So as we come out of the roundabout, just on the left-hand side, this is where the actual terrorist attack took place, where Hallel and Yagel were murdered right in the middle of the median here on the left-hand side. So far, we are not seeing any burned homes. We're looking for smoke damage, fire damage, any burned out vehicles. We just passed the center of town. We're gonna keep looking. I'm looking on the left side of the road as we go. Right side of the road, everything looks pretty normal. Trying to slow down here so we can catch everything on camera. I know we will find a couple of things on the other end of town, so just hang on here for a second. We're passing. Yep, everything looks pretty good. IDF still has a strong presence here to keep law and order and keep an eye on everything. So there's a car. I don't think that was burned. I think it was just gutted. That's something kind of the Arabs do to themselves, though. מה נשמע? מצוין.
למה לא עצרת?
אנחנו מהר ברכה. הר ברכה. תודה. Thankfully, the soldiers are keeping good tabs on things, so they wanted to make sure we weren't causing any kind of disruption in the town. So there's some vehicles over there that were kind of torn up, but it didn't look like fire damage. We look on the left side of the road here. There's a home. Let's see, where is it? We didn't pass it, did we? Oh, there it is right there. So there's a little home in the middle of those two houses that was definitely burned that night. And if you saw like a picture of the IDF soldiers helping Arabs out of the fire, it was probably from that house right there. So that's the one home in the town that was definitely on fire from that night. So right-hand side, there's a couple of vehicles. There's one vehicle that was burned right there. And the main thing is this junkyard. This is probably where you saw a lot of the footage from that night. This junkyard on the right side of the road. And the building next to the junkyard definitely has smoke damage on it. The walls are kind of blackened. The building itself was not on fire. The junkyard, about 50, 60 cars were on fire. And the smoke from that fire blackened the walls of that building right there. So as we come out of the town of Huwarrah, there's a couple more houses here. And the night after the attack that we were down here, there were a few dozen Jewish teenagers from nearby community, or from, I'm not sure where they're from, but they were throwing rocks, and there were a few fires set. So there's this house right here, which I don't see any windows broken or any smoke damage. There was a fire in the yard of that house, behind the house. I don't think it did damage to anything, except maybe a few trees. On the left-hand side, there's a small junkyard with maybe 6 or 8 cars that were burned. Another small junkyard there. This building looks fine. The building on our right-hand side, I think, has 1 or 2 windows that were broken. And the main thing that happened was this building right here on the right. A lot of the windows got broken. You can even see another news crew filming that house right there, because obviously they're going to focus in on the one house that was damaged by rocks that were thrown. So there you have it. We are out of the town of Huwarrah now, and that was the entire length and breadth of the town and all of the damage that we could find. One house that the windows were broken, one house that was burned, and 2 junkyards that were burned. That's pretty much it. You know, this particular terrorist attack that left Hallel and Yagel Yaniv dead was difficult for the media not to condemn, because when you have such a brutal, violent attack, execution style, gunned down 2 young men simply driving in their car, it doesn't look good when you're the mainstream media and you're anti-Israel and you immediately try to flip the blame for their deaths on the boys themselves or their family or their neighbors. Like, it was hard for the media not to condemn this particular murderous terrorist attack on February 26th. They had to evoke sympathy for the Yaniv family. The only problem is it only lasted about 5 hours, because as soon as the first headline broke about the supposed violent Jewish settlers burning down Huwarrah, the media pounced on it. And that was all we heard for the next several weeks. They literally swallowed the story about the horrific murder of the 2 Yaniv boys and instead focused on these pogroms and something similar, acts that were so despicable and horrible. They're similar to the Holocaust. And there were even left-leaning Jews that marched in protest to Huwarrah. They held press conferences that raised more than 1 million shekels to help pay for the damages, which, as you probably know, a lot of that money may end up going to the owner of the junkyard of the cars that were burned, who is actually a terrorist who spent 5 years in an Israeli prison. What did we hear? Jews burned Huwarrah. Violent Jewish radical settlers. This particular quote from Axios says, quote, "The violence, including some of the worst by Israeli settlers in years, casts doubt on whether the commitments made by Israeli and Palestinian officials earlier Sunday aimed at de-escalating tensions in the West Bank will succeed." This is Axios blaming Israel for basically these murders and focusing all of their attention on the few dozen Jewish youth that threw rocks and set fires in Huwarrah. And you saw the damage for yourself. Nothing left to say, right? You saw exactly what happened there. The media allowed their entire focus to be swallowed up by the lie-filled propaganda that a few Jews throwing stones somehow was 10 times worse than Hallel and Yagel being executed in cold blood simply because they were Jewish. I'm particularly sickened by this story, and as pro-Israel Zionist, you should be too. Guys, that's why you should come and stand with us here at the Israel Guys in Yovel, and stand with the residents of Judea and Samaria, stand with the land and people of Israel's heartland at our 3 rallies coming up in the United States. March 26th in Nashville, Tennessee, March 28th in Houston, Texas, and March 30th in Dallas, Texas. We even have a resident, Nati Ram, a friend of ours who you may have heard of, coming to be one of our main speaker for the evening. What is the agenda of these events? Simply to stand and show the world that there are people who do not believe the lie-filled propaganda media, and people who do not believe, people who do stand with Israel's right to be sovereign in their homeland. We have to fight back against the horrific Jew-hating narrative that our world is shoving down our throats. Come and stand with us in person. If you're anywhere near Texas or Tennessee, the last week of March, you have to come and stand with Israel's biblical heartland. Go to theisraelguys.com/rally to find out about all 3 of those events. Guys, we would love to stand you there. We have to make our voice heard loud and clear that Israel is alive in Jerusalem, Judea, and Samaria, their biblical homeland. Guys, let us know what you think down in the comments. Let us know if you will be at the rallies in person. I'd love to see your comments down below. Make sure you subscribe and get that conversation going. As always, tune out the fake news and tune into what is actually happening here in the biblical heartland of Israel. We are here every single day of the week, Monday through Friday, with your direct connection to the land and people of Israel.